Hi, my name is Stephen Rothstein, and I'm the Managing Director of the CERES Accelerator for Sustainable Capital Markets. And I'm thrilled to be with you at Florida Climate Week. I'm sorry I can't be there in person, but just looking at your program, you have so many important conversations and appreciate the leadership and having these important conversations. It makes such a big difference. CERES is a nonprofit, and I want to talk specifically about one of our initiatives called the Freedom to Invest Initiative. Next slide, please. Um, so start with background, next slide. That there have been many states, including Florida, where there is information sharing about what's real in terms of responsible investing. And that we believe that the market, the idea of freedom to invest is that the market, meaning big investors, big companies, medium-sized companies, they should be free to think about the risks and opportunities that the market presents itself. Next slide, please. That it shouldn't be tied to an agenda. We don't support, for example, divestment of oil, but we also don't support divestment of solar and other things like that. This shows, I won't go through the details, but that the backing of this is a lot of fossil fuel interests that are really trying to protect their business interests, so not the fiduciary interests of investors and companies. Next slide, please. And this has manifested in both federal and state areas. And I'll quickly go through these. And obviously, if from the recording, the slides will be available and happy to answer more questions on a one-on-one basis. Next slide, please. There's been a lot happening in the last few years at the federal level. First, the Department of Labor introduced a rule that said for your 401k, your 403b, your retirement fund, if you wanted to, not you mandated, if you wanted to be able to invest some or all of it in a fund that thought about climate issues or others, you would have the right to do that. And that there's some people who are challenging that. Again, it's not a mandate, just an opportunity. There have been a series of hearings on a variety of climate and ESG issues. The SEC has come up with a final rule last March that said companies should disclose their climate risk. Not that they have to take certain action, just that they should disclose it. We believe in the free market, but the free market works better, we think, when there's good information. And there have been challenges to that in terms of the requirement. And there's other legislation. Next slide, please. I won't go through all of these. There's been a series of bills that have been introduced, and who knows what will happen to them. But they all, in one way or another, would limit the marketplace, would limit either investors, proxy, companies, and other factors. And we believe in, again, a competitive market as long as there is good information. Next slide, please. In addition to the federal work, there's lots of activity happening at the state level. Next slide, please. So in 23 and 24, again, I'm not going through all the numbers, but there have been legislation introduced in many states that would limit the marketplace. And some saying that if you're a bank that have solar policies or an ESG policy, you can't work with the state. Or if investors have those, they can't, or insurers or others. We fundamentally believe, again, in the marketplace. And in fact, it turns out most legislators do too, of both parties. So if you, again, I'm not going to go through each of the numbers, but I'll just talk about 2024. So in this year, there were 161 bills that were filed, or some that were carried over from last year. 161. Only 5 were adopted. 129 have been were voted down, and others are just not going to, because of legislature either being over or will be over soon. So only 5. What that says to us is that most legislators in most states, whether they be more progressive or more conservative states, think that the market works. There have been a variety of other efforts from attorneys general and treasurers, again, to try to address some of these issues. Next slide, please. So this is excuse me, a map of state policy that, again, tells you whether it's one piece of legislation or 2 or what's happening. It gives you a sense that there's a lot of activity that are trying to restrict the market. And we fundamentally believe in the marketplace and hope that continues. One of the reasons we believe, next slide, is because of the costs. there's a lot of studies that have been done in many states, including Florida and Oklahoma and Texas and many, many other states, that say if you limit the market, it's going to cost taxpayers more, and in a variety of ways. Next slide. So if you go to the freedomtoinvest.org website, there's all the links to these, and there's a few here. But for example, in Texas, the employee retirement system, they estimate, so it wasn't a liberal group that did this, it was really the state, that it would cost $6 billion. Kansas estimated a loss of 3.6 billion over 10 years. So again, it's going to reduce investment returns. Next slide, please. It's also the economic impact. Again, this is just showing lots of studies. We're not going to go through them, but if you limit the number of banks that can operate with the state, that can loan to cities and towns, you're reducing competition, which is against the free market, but it's also reducing competition. Next slide, please. And it's also led to higher interest rate. So there was a study done that the Texas Association of Business, again, it's a Texas Association of Business, that the laws that have already been passed are costing the state $700 million in lost economic activity and more than 3,000 jobs. Oklahoma, so there are many of these. So again, it gets back to that same message about we support the free marketplace. Next slide, please. So what have we been doing? Next slide. In addition to talking to folks, so we started this initiative, Freedom to Invest, and working with a broad array of partners, business leaders, financial leaders, investors, companies, policymakers, advocates, to try to communicate this, unions, faith leaders. Next slide, please. And so these are some examples of just the types of folks, but again, investors representing trillions of dollars have joined this effort because they think that it's very important. Many state treasurers, attorneys general, and others have done that, faith leaders. So it's a very broad-based, national, nonpartisan initiative. And we found that by talking to folks on both sides of the aisle and say, let the market work. And if people feel they want to put their money someplace, whether it be more fossil fuel or less fossil fuel, we support them having the right to do that. But not forcing other people, giving people the choice. Next slide, please. So we hope that all of you, as part of your Florida Climate Week efforts, get involved with this. These are a few areas. I'm not going to talk about each one here, but on our website, we have this. So we have statements to sign, contact legislators, op-eds, social media, and other ways as well. Next slide, please. We also have a lot of resources. So again, this slide deck will be available, or you can write to us if you want information. So there's a lot of economic information, a lot of analysis, what's happening with various state bills, whether it be in Florida or other places. And we'd love to work with you on that piece of it. Next slide. So this is my contact information. Please reach out. Let me know how we can collaborate. We'd love your ideas, your suggestions, because we think that this really works better with all of us together. And my last slide, next slide, please, is please join us if it's possible. We're going to be in New York on October 23rd, and we'd love to have you join us for that. So if we can take down the slides. And now we are thrilled to have a very special guest. Carlos, if you could join us. Many of you know former Florida Congressman Carlos Curbelo. He is a distinguished career. And I say that it's especially noteworthy because he is so young and he's already accomplished so much, both in the private sector and in legislation as a legislator and as a thought leader. So thank you, Carlos, for joining us first.
Stephen, it's good to be with you, and thanks for that generous introduction. I don't know if I still look young, but I don't feel that young with two teenage girls. But I appreciate your kind words, and I appreciate the important work you and your team do in this space.
Well, I have boys, so I can't imagine what teenage girls. Maybe that's a conversation for another day. Would love to have more. But tell me, you're devoting so much of your time now in your post-congressional efforts on extreme weather and other climate risk. Why have you decided to do that?
Well, Stephen, it's really been a privilege to continue the work I started in Congress, now as a private citizen and in the private sector. I represented South Florida, including the Florida Keys, and sea level rise, extreme weather. I mean, these are all constant threats, not just to the Florida environment, but also to the Florida economy, to our way of life, to the possibility of people living in this part of the world. So when I was in Congress, I realized that whoever represents South Florida has to play a leading role in this cause. And it's really been a blessing after Congress to find so many partners and friends that are doing important work in the private sector around Congress and around the government, and to become part of that community has really been special.
That's great. And so tell us more about why you think climate risks are financial risks, whether it be in South Florida or nationally, and just more about your background and your thinking there.
Look, I would like to say that I care about sustainability and the environment because it was some innate cause or drive that I was born with, or I had a dream or something like that. But it really wasn't like that for me. This was just simple math. I came to understand that the area I represent, and of course later I learned that pretty much the entire world and everyone in some way is being affected by the changes in climate due to human activity. And I realized, if we don't address this, it's going to be even more disruptive than it has been already. It's going to be a greater challenge that is going to pose a threat to American national security, to American economic competitiveness, and of course to, at least at first, most acutely to specific regions and parts of the country, right? Especially low-lying areas, areas that are prone to flooding. So this, for me, was a matter of fact, not a matter of inspiration, not some kind of special calling, but just a sober analysis of the risks associated with the changing climate, and the concrete solutions that exist to address this in a meaningful way, to put an end to these dangerous trends, and to start building the economy of the future that is replete with interesting jobs and opportunities, and opportunities for entrepreneurship and innovation. So this is a tough subject. It's one that, of course, gives us consternation sometimes, but oftentimes it's also one of hope and opportunity and a new beginning. So, yeah, Stephen, this for me is a matter of mathematics, statistics, and risk, not some kind of I don't know, God-inspired activity, even though I do believe that God also cares about the way we treat the gifts that we've been given.
I think that makes so much sense, and it is very much fact and science and data driven, and we're seeing it every day. I mean, extreme weather, just had Hurricane Francine and others recently. Um, to address some of these big issues, what role do you think state and federal government should have to, should they be limiting the free market in pensions and banking, financial institutions, and more broadly, what do you think the state and federal government should be doing?
Look, I've always thought of the government as the referees in the game. Now, I was a high school basketball referee. I think that's what most prepared me for a career in politics, because you're always getting yelled at. You're getting yelled at from both sides. That's when you know you're doing a really good job. So I don't think the government should really be the protagonist in anything, but the government should set the rules. The government should um, intervene only to make sure the market system is working appropriately. What does that mean? We know that this risk associated to climate, to flooding, to extreme weather is out there. We know in large part what's causing it, and the government has to make sure that that's accounted for in the economy. The same way the government, for example, make sure that, for example, cigarette smoking, there's a very high cost to our healthcare system associated with that. They don't tell people they can't smoke unless you're too young, but there is, for example, a tax system in place that ensures that we have some resources to deal with the costs that cigarette smoking imposes on the rest of society. Well, that's the role of government, to make sure the rules are fair, that the rules are clear, so that the market, so that individuals and companies and firms acting in their own interests can take us to wherever we need to go. We know the market in this country is great at innovating, at inventing new things, at helping bring people out of poverty by giving them opportunity. That's the history of our country. That's why so many people want to come to our country. So many people want to be American. So that's the role for the government, to recognize where there are risks and to make sure that the market has the information and the instruments to address those risks. We need clear and good information, right? It's very hard as people are, for example, people who trade stocks. Well, they need to know how companies are doing. They need to know what risks companies face, how much they're making, how much they're losing, right? In order to make those decisions, we need good information. So that's another thing the government has to do: equip people, make sure citizens and businesses and financial advisors have the information they need to make the best decisions possible for themselves, for their companies, and for their clients.
That's so helpful. And thinking about the government as kind of a referee, rules, helping people get information so people can make decisions on their own is very useful. It's a useful construct. In that, before you came on, I gave a brief update on our Freedom to Invest initiative. Would love to get your sense of that and that kind of work, and what role you think that has in the state and federal debate right now.
So while government should be setting the rules and making sure we all have good information, the information we need to make the best choices possible to invest the way that it is most beneficial to us, government should not be telling anyone how to invest their resources. That includes individuals, but of course it also includes large firms, big pension funds, businesses. The government shouldn't interfere. That destroys the market system. That destroys the idea of a free economy where people are investing and acting as efficiently as possible, not just for their own benefit, but we know that this ends up being for everybody's greater benefit, right? For the greater good, so to speak. So, we've seen government, especially at the state level, try to restrict certain types of investing, in some cases investing in traditional energy, in many other cases restricting firms and organizations from investing in the sustainability economy, right? And what many of us believe is the economy of the future, the economy that allows us to be prosperous and to make good profits while protecting the environment and making sure that the whole system is sustainable, right? I mean, we know that if, for example, we cut down all the trees in the forests at once, that's going to be extremely detrimental to the economy and very harmful to the country. So we regulate that kind of activity, right? In this case, again, the government should be focused on basic regulation, making sure there's a fair playing field for firms and people to compete and invest, making sure we have good information, but not telling people where and how they should invest. If there's a particular firm a pension fund, an individual who decides, I want to invest in clean energy projects because I think that they're going to be very profitable. And I believe that that's what's best for the world. I care about my children, my grandchildren. I believe that investing in clean energy is going to be good for our family long term and for future generations of our family. The government shouldn't intervene to tell someone they can't or shouldn't do that. Just like there's people out there, want to invest in traditional energy companies that have been around for over 100 years. No one should get in the way of that. People should be allowed to make the investments that they feel are best for them, for their families, for their firms. And for the government to intervene in that is, in my view, antithetical to what this country is all about. My family had to flee a country with a central command economy, where the government was making all decisions about how and where resources would be invested. That country is a failed state. It's the island of Cuba, and we all know the history there. We need not, in the United States, imitate that type of heavy-handed government approach. We should allow the free market, the private sector to invest. We should allow people who are sitting in boardrooms trying to figure out how to invest funds for pension groups and other major organizations, insurance companies. I mean, all of these people need to act in the best interests of their clients, the people they represent, and the government should never, ever get in the way of that.
We are in what's called violent agreement with that, and appreciate what a thoughtful spokesperson you are for that. If we were in another universe and you were in a very senior role in Florida state government, not federal, but state government, what would be one or two or three things you'd be recommending to be done to address this risks right now?
Well, Stephen, it's a tough time in Florida when it comes to home affordability. A part of that is because so many people have moved here, and we celebrate that because people have chosen our state. Another explanation for this situation is that insurance rates are out of control. Some Floridians have had their insurance premiums double over and over and over again. Windstorm coverage, flood coverage. It is very, very difficult for middle-class families to make rent payments in the state, make their monthly mortgage and insurance and tax payments. And a big part of the reason is that we're so exposed to flood risk, to the threat of major hurricanes, extreme weather. We know that hurricanes are intensifying more rapidly, that when we have had them, they've been stronger and larger than they used to be. And I want to be very clear here. We don't have hurricanes because of climate change. Okay, hurricanes have been documented here in this peninsula for hundreds of years, long before humans started polluting in a very dangerous way. But without question, over the last 15, 20 years, we have seen a very high number of large and very strong, dangerous storms. And this state has been lucky. We've been hit a few times, but we have dodged many other major hurricanes here in recent years. This is a fact. And that's why insurance rates are so high. These insurance companies, they don't enjoy raising rates because they know that it puts a strain on customers. People start shopping around. I mean, some of these insurance companies have left the state. They refuse to insure homes here. And of course, we're left with a government option here in Citizens, which is the state-run insurance company. So we have an insurance crisis in Florida, and it's very important for our state's government to take this risk into account, to understand, number one, that they have to invest more in resilience. They have to invest in seawalls and infrastructure that will protect our state from the potentially disastrous effects of extreme weather. And then also, we should, at the very least, not discourage, not discourage. I'm not saying we should tell firms and individuals what they should do, but we should not discourage them through policy from making investments in the clean energy economy, which we know ultimately will solve all of this. And of course, it'll take time, and it's not going to happen, the day that we go to net zero economy, but it's certainly going to get us off this dangerous path we're on. So I think that's what needs to be done. We have made some investments in resilience here. I applaud and celebrate those. We have to do a lot more. And then we have to just be honest and transparent about why this is happening. And again, empower the private sector, empower individual citizens and consumers to drive us in the right direction.
That's great. Well, I hope someday that you're back in government in one way, whether it be state, federal, appointed, elected in some way.
I thought we were friends. You know how happy I am.
Exactly. Okay. All
Who
right.
knows?
Well,
Maybe there will be another rodeo, but for now, I feel very blessed to have served 8 years in public office. And what's really extraordinary, Stephen, you know this, and I hope everyone watching learns this if they don't know it already. You can make a big difference as a private citizen by collaborating,
absolutely.
by finding like-minded people, and together building the future with them. So I again thank you for all your work and for the opportunity to work together.
Thank you. And everyone at Florida Climate Week, thank you for spending time listening. We know how valuable your time is. And as Carlos said, I hope many of you are probably already involved, and that's great. And we celebrate that. And if you want more information about CERES or Freedom to Invest, go to freedomtoinvest.org, or my email was shown earlier, and look forward to talking. Thanks, and hope the rest of Florida Climate Week goes well. Thanks, everyone. Carlos, thank you so much.
Thanks.